Hi guys, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. As some of you may or may not know, you will know if you follow me on Instagram, I am massively into reading. So today I just wanted to share with you guys a few of my favourite ever books. Now if you're not into reading, I'm sorry, but if you're not, you should definitely try out some of these books because they are incredible. So let's get right on into it. My first book I'm going to talk about today is obviously Alice in Wonderland. You guys may or may not realise that I'm hardcore obsessed with Alice in Wonderland. I adore it. I know it's a kid's book and I did read it as a child, but I've read it so many times as an adult as well. It's my, I want to say, comfort book. Like if I'm feeling sad or I need a bit of pepping up, I will always read Alice in Wonderland. Oh, I'm sorry about the light actually. It's really, really dark outside, so the natural light isn't the best today. I live and breathe Alice in Wonderland apparently. I've got tattoos of Alice in Wonderland. I think you can see one of my Alice pictures behind me. Oh, maybe I could do a haul of showing all my Alice in Wonderland things. It will always be probably my all-time favourite, just because it really spoke to me. It amazed me as a child and it continues to amaze me as an adult. And Lewis Carroll, whose name isn't actually Lewis Carroll, his real name is Charles Dodgson. Dodgson? It's got an extra D in it, I always struggle to say it. But he really spoke to me as an author. And no, he was not on drugs when he wrote this, for any of you who thought that. If you know how much I love Alice in Wonderland and how much that book means to me, it makes a whole lot more sense as I'm going to show you the rest of the books, because it keeps up with that kind of magical land fantasy theme, because fantasy is my favourite genre of books. You'll see a few classics in here and stuff, but mainly I love fantasy novels. I'm going to go for one of the very, very best, and that is The Hobbit. Now, I adore Lord of the Rings. It is, again, one of my favourite things in the whole world, but The Hobbit, my mum read to me when I was a child, which, along with Alice, obviously got me into what I read today as an adult. But The Hobbit was my entranceway to those. And I remember my mum reading it to me as a kid, and then I've read it so many times as an adult, and no matter how many times you read it, it's still beautiful. It's an incredible book, and it's so magical, and it's just amazing. I really can't say much more about The Hobbit than I just love it, and it reminds me of being a kid as well. Okay, so I'm going to go on to some books now that you may or may not have heard of. They are sticking with the whole fantasy genre, but some of these books, surprisingly, people have never heard of, even though they are some of the best fantasy authors, I think, of all time, and I think many people will agree with. So the first one I'm going to show you guys is Magician, written by Raymond E. Feist. But he has a very kind of similar feel to The Lord of the Rings, so it's all about magic and wizards and elves and dwarves and everything I personally love. You know, anything that isn't real life I'm automatically drawn to, because I have a super vivid imagination and I love I love all those kind of things. I think they're great. Magician is actually the first in a series called the Rift War Saga. This book's actually really funny. It's a really close family favourite. So I've read it, all my uncles have read it, my little brother's read it, my mum's read it, my granddad's read it. Everybody in my family adores this book, and it is impossible not to, because it's so well written and the characters are amazing. You will fall in love with them, and I just fell in love with the entire world, which I have a serious problem with because I almost always fall in love with worlds that don't exist. Oops. So one of my next favourites is a book by an author named Terry Brooks. This one's called Armageddon Children, and it's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. Like hardcore, it's incredible. So these books were actually written in a bit of a funny order. If you guys have ever heard of the Shannara Chronicles, which is actually a series now, they made a series out of it, He wrote that series first, and it's about a group of elves who live in the real world, but after all the humans have disappeared or got killed off or something. I've never actually read the Shannara ones, they're not supposed to be as good, but these ones are actually the prequels. And because in Shannara it's about the aftermath of an Armageddon on Earth, these ones tell you how the Armageddon came about, and there's actually a prequel set to this set as well. The whole series is incredible, like, oh my goodness. I've cried and fallen in love with characters and cried some more and more. He loves killing people, so if you get easily upset by characters dying, don't read it, but do, because it's incredible. But this one's actually my favourite. It is the first book in the second set of 3, and dude, it's amazing. But if you do want to read them, make sure you read Running with the Demon first, because even though he didn't write them in that order, you'll be so much more amazed for knowing how this whole kind of world and all the demons and everything kind of started. Now this next author I'm going to go on to, I would consider probably the best fantasy author of all time, right? And when you talk about kind of fantasy books now, but he doesn't really come up in those kind of obvious like fantasy writers like George R.R. Martin and J.R.R. Tolkien, and I don't know, J.K. Rowling, is she considered one of those? I don't know, I like Harry Potter but not that much. But he doesn't really come up as much, and he should do, and that is Sir Terry Pratchett. Now please tell me at least one of my viewers has read a Terry Pratchett book, because I barely come across anybody that has read a Terry Pratchett book, except for me and my mum, who were obsessed with Terry Pratchett. He is essentially a fantasy author, but he draws on elements from our world and incorporates them into his version of our world, which is called the Discworld. I can't say anything more about them than that. They are absolutely astounding. My favourite one is called Lords and Ladies. It has one of my favourite characters of all time, and her name is Granny Weatherwax. Now I'm pretty sure Terry Pratchett met my grandmother at some point in her life, because she is so friggin' similar to my grandma. It's unbelievable. Actually, if you've watched my vlogs, you would have heard me speak about Granny before when I went to the Sydney Opera House, because he writes a book called Masquerade, which is essentially based off of opera houses. And it has this character in it, Granny. She's amazing. She is so strict and so serious, but she has an absolute heart of gold, and she is one of my favourite characters of all time, out of any books I've ever read in my life. But the great thing about Terry Pratchett, I'm going to rant about Terry Pratchett the most, but the great thing about Terry Pratchett is, although he has all these fantasy elements in it, majority of it is humour. Now he is the only author in the world that has made me laugh out loud when I read a book. I sit on the tubes in London reading these, and I laugh out loud and everyone looks at me like I'm insane. More insane than when I vlog walking down the road. But if you have never read a Terry Pratchett book, pick one up. The first one is called The Colour of Magic. Pick it up and your life is going to be absolutely changed. Changed completely and utterly. Maybe I'll take you on to some more of my classic favourites. So the first one I'm going to go for is The Great Gatsby. I love The Great Gatsby. Oh dear lord. If any of you have noticed my tattoo, oh, you can't really see that. My tattoo on my wrist, that is a quote from The Great Gatsby. If you watch the film, you won't know the quote because it's not in the film. It's in the book. I'm obsessed with the 1920s. I love the fashion and the music and everything. I think it's the most beautiful era. If I could live in any era at all, I'd live in the 1920s. 100%. But in New York, like not in London. London was rubbish. New York, 1920s. That's the place for me. But The Great Gatsby, many of you have probably read it. Maybe you've read it for school. I feel very sorry for you if you read it for school, for English A-level or English GCSE or whatever you call it in other countries, because I would cry if I had to pick this book apart. Like, oh god, it'd be awful. I'd absolutely hate it because I absolutely adore it. So, oh sorry, I'm like so uncomfortable, my leg went dead. He has such a wonderful way of capturing the human essence. And when the books originally came out in the 1920s, The Great Gatsby came out in 1922, it was actually banned because all the people of that time period didn't like the way he portrayed them so closely to how they actually were. Now it seems strange because books don't really get banned anymore, as there's not as much censoring. And nowadays there are plenty of books and TV shows and movies that portray people the way they actually are. But back then, people didn't want to be portrayed the way they were because some of them weren't particularly nice humans. A lot of the females in the book married for money and had miserable lives, and they lost all their money because of all the recessions and things. And apparently people didn't like that. So most of his books got banned and they didn't actually pick up popularity until after he died, which was very similar to most of the authors and the artists in that time. So now we're taking on a bit of a different genre, right? And the next book I'm going to show you is Trainspotting. I have such a weird taste in books because I'll go from loving fantasy and then I'll go to classics and then I'll go to cult classics, which is exactly what Trainspotting is. Now, many of you have probably seen the film, and to be fair, the book is very, very similar, but Trainspotting is written in one of the most interesting ways I have ever experienced in my life. Except maybe A Clockwork Orange, which is another one of my favourite books, but I don't actually have it here at the moment. But Trainspotting is written in Scottish dialect. What I mean by that is instead of writing in usual plain English, I can't even speak English. Instead of writing in English, well, he does write in English, but he writes the way they pronounce the words instead. He'll write do not as in D-I-N-N-A-E, get as in G-I-T, all A-W, and you get the gist from that. He also doesn't use speech marks. He will just put a line and take it down one, so you never know who's talking, which I think actually relates to the whole drug culture he's speaking about, because they never really understand what's going on and it's all a bit confused and they're just in a drug-fueled panic and whatnot. But it is beautiful, and it's not beautiful, it's morbidly beautiful, but his writing is astounding and it's such an interesting way to actually write a book. These are probably the only two modern books I have, and they are A Dark Shade of Magic and Six of Crows. Now, I always moan about books that do the bookstagram rounds and Instagram rounds because I'm like, they're only popular because they've got pretty covers or because they've just had a mass amount of following from teenage girls. But these two, I have to say, are amazing. I love them. They're so well written and they're two of the best, or I don't know if Six of Crows would be counted as fantasy. They are the two of the best fantasy books I have read in the past 10 years. Well, that have come out in the past 10 years, because I haven't found a book that I would consider one of my favourites in a very, very long time until I found these two. Anyone who's watching this video will probably already read them because they're very popular books at the moment, and I don't blame them because they are beautiful. With Six of Crows, I've never been that invested in a whole group of characters in a really, really, really long time. They were great. Okay guys, well that is all I have time for. I'm only saying that because I could keep talking about books for, I don't know, years, but my battery's gonna die. So that's the end of it. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. I sure do love talking about books, so if you guys want to see me talking about my childhood favourites, the books I want to read, just books I think are awesome, which aren't my favourites. Actually, I have more favourites. I could probably do more favourites. I basically love books, so if you guys are into these videos, please let me know by commenting down below, and then I can keep uploading them because I really, really, really enjoy it. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit that big red subscribe button down below because I'm almost at 100 and I'm so excited and I really want to get to 100. So help me get to 100, guys, please. Alright guys, thank you so much and have a lovely day.